Off the plane. Now, you're in the wrong seat in the wrong cabin. The woman in 2A didn't move. She looked up from her tablet, calm, her voice level. I'm in the seat printed on my boarding pass. 2A, first class. I'd be happy to show you. I've heard that one before. Officer Kyle Brennan leaned over her, one hand on the seat back, close enough that she could smell coffee and contempt. People like you buy a coach ticket and slide up front when the crew's not looking. Get your bag. Let's go. She reached into the seat pocket, slow, deliberate, hands visible the whole time. She held out the boarding pass. He didn't read it. He slapped it out of her hand, and it fluttered to the cabin floor. I'm not asking again. She stood, because the alternative was his hands on her, and she had already counted 4 passengers filming. He gripped her upper arm hard enough to bruise and pulled her into the aisle, her tablet clattering against the armrest. A man in 1C nodded approvingly, the kind of nod that said finally, someone's doing something. A teenager in 3B held his phone up and laughed into it, narrating for whoever was watching. An older woman 2 rows back pulled her purse into her lap and stared hard out the window, wanting no part of it. He marched her up the jet bridge, fingers still clamped on her arm, past the gate agent who looked away, into the terminal where 2 airport officers were already waiting because Brennan had radioed ahead that he had a fare jumper, possibly intoxicated, refusing crew instructions. None of it was true. He hadn't checked a single fact. He had no idea. Because the woman he just dragged off that plane by the arm is the newly appointed police commissioner for the very district that employs him, sworn in 9 days ago, flying home from the conference where she accepted the post. And in 47 minutes, every person who touched this, Brennan, the officers waiting at the gate, the supervisor who will tell her to calm down, will be standing in a row, hands behind their backs, waiting to learn what she already knows. They just don't know it yet. But this story doesn't start here. Her name is Adaora Whitfield, 51 years old, 26 years in law enforcement, the last 6 running the Internal Affairs Bureau for the state's largest metro police force before the mayor's office tapped her to take over the Eastfield district. A district with the highest civilian complaint rate in 3 counties and a discipline system that had quietly buried almost every one of them. She'd spent her career learning how departments protect their own. She knew the language. She knew where the files went to die. She knew, better than almost anyone alive, exactly how a man like Kyle Brennan got made. Her father had worked 38 years as a baggage handler at this same airport. Loaded planes in August heat and January ice, came home with his back ruined and his hands cracked, and never once let her see him bitter. He died the spring before her promotion came through. In her carry-on, in a flat cardboard sleeve she never checked, was the last photograph ever taken of him, standing on the tarmac in his orange vest, squinting into the sun, grinning like he owned the sky. She'd been flying home to put it on her new office wall. That was the whole plan for the day. Land, get the photo framed, sleep in her own bed before her first full week. That was all. Kyle Brennan was 34, and he was, on paper, exactly the kind of officer departments put on recruitment posters. 2-time Officer of the Year for the Eastfield District, a wall of commendations, the union vice president's hand-picked protege. He worked airport detail because he liked the traffic of it, the endless stream of strangers he got to decide things about. And underneath the commendations, in a file Adaora had read on a plane 2 weeks earlier as part of her district handover, 19 civilian complaints in 6 years. Excessive force, unlawful detention, racial profiling, named explicitly, 4 separate times. Everyone reviewed by the same supervisor. Everyone closed as unfounded. The supervisor was the union vice president. The union vice president had handpicked Brennan. She had read his name on a plane. Now his hand was around her arm in a terminal, and he had no idea he'd just assaulted the one person in the state who already knew every single thing he'd ever gotten away with. "Sit her down over there," Brennan told the two airport officers. "She's a fare jumper," gave the crew a hard time. "Probably been drinking." "I haven't had anything to drink," Adaora said. Calm, level. "I'd ask you to note the time, and to note that I've been cooperative. It's 4:12. The taller airport officer, a young man named Reyes, hesitated. Something in how she said it. The precision. People who'd been drinking didn't ask you to log the time. "Sir, did you check her boarding pass?" "I don't need to check anything. I watched her." "You watched her sitting in a seat," Adaora said, "which she paid for." She didn't raise her voice. She never would. 11 minutes, she thought, watching the supervisor approach across the terminal. 11 minutes and 4 violations. And we haven't even started. In her pocket, her phone buzzed against her hip. She didn't reach for it. She knew who it was. Before the jet bridge, before Brennan's hand, in the 3 seconds it took her to stand up from 2A, she had pressed a single button on her watch, a message to one person. That person was her wife. Dr. Renee Whitfield was a civil rights attorney with 22 years of practice, a name partner, and 250,000 people who followed her commentary on police accountability. She was sitting in the cell phone lot half a mile away, waiting to pick her wife up from the airport. When the message came through, "Eastfield officer, airport, pulled me off the plane, recording, come in." Renee did not panic. Renee had handled worse. She started the car, and she made 3 calls before she reached the terminal. The first was to a reporter she trusted. The second was to the mayor's chief of staff. The third was to the district's duty desk, where she identified herself, calmly, as counsel for Commissioner Whitfield, and asked them to please confirm which officers were on airport detail this afternoon. "For the record, documentation wins," she told a courtroom once. "Emotion loses. Evidence is everything." Across the terminal, a third figure was already moving. Sergeant Daniel Cho had been with Eastfield's internal affairs for 9 years, and for 3 of those years, he had been quietly building a file on Kyle Brennan that kept getting killed above his head. He'd been at the airport that afternoon by coincidence, off duty, picking up his sister. He saw the orange vest memory of every complaint he'd ever filed walking across the terminal with his hand wrapped around a woman's arm. And he recognized her face from a swearing-in photo 9 days old, and his stomach dropped into his shoes. He'd been waiting 3 years for a case Brennan couldn't make disappear. He took out his phone and started recording, and he did not stop. The supervisor arrived. Lieutenant Marcus Hale, Airport Division, 22 years on. The kind of tired that has stopped asking questions. "What have we got?" "Fare jumper, refused crew, gave me attitude," Brennan said. "I want her cited and trespassed." Hale looked at the woman. A sharp suit, no smell of alcohol. Sitting with her back straight and her hands folded, looking at him the way a principal looks at a substitute teacher. Something in his gut went cold. The specific cold of a man who has spent 22 years learning to recognize when a situation is about to outgrow him. "Ma'am, can I see some ID?" "You can," Adaora said. "Before I hand it to you, Lieutenant, I want to make sure you understand the situation you're stepping into. Because right now, you can still choose which side of it you're on." 31 minutes, she thought. Officer Brennan put his hands on me and removed me from a flight without checking my boarding pass, my identification, or a single fact. 3 of your officers are now standing around that decision. I'd think carefully about how many more of you want your names in this. Is that a threat? Brennan laughed. You hear that? Now she's threatening cops. Real creative, I'll give you that. That's a new one. Adaora reached into her jacket. Slow, palms visible. Everything by the book. The choreography her father taught her before she could drive. The same choreography she'd spent a career trying to make unnecessary for everyone else's children. She handed Hale her identification. Hale looked at it. Hale stopped breathing. The color drained from his face from the jaw up, like water leaving a glass. His eyes went to the second line, then to the seal, then up to her face, and back down, and up again. Officer Brennan, he said, and his voice had changed completely. Step back from her. Step back right now. What? Why? Step back. Brennan freezes. What is it? He's still smiling, but the smile has nothing under it. What? Adaora stood. She straightened her cuffs. She picked her own boarding pass up off the floor where he'd slapped it, because no one else had thought to, and she held it where the cameras could see it. My name is Adaora Whitfield, Police Commissioner, Eastfield District. I was sworn in 9 days ago. She let it sit. Which means, Officer Brennan, that you don't work for the airport. You don't work for Lieutenant Hale. As of this afternoon, you work for me. Brennan's mouth opens. Nothing comes out. I read your file 2 weeks ago on a plane very much like the one you just dragged me off of. 19 complaints, 4 for exactly this, all closed by the same man. She slipped her ID back into her jacket. I had questions about how that was possible. You've just answered every one of them, in a terminal, in front of cameras, to my face. I couldn't have known. No, she said quietly. You couldn't have. That's the entire point. You didn't do this to a commissioner. You thought you were doing it to a woman with no power on a Tuesday, where it wouldn't cost you anything. She looked at the cameras, not at him. The only thing different about today is that this time, the woman signs your paychecks. She turned to Hale. Lieutenant, I want Officer Brennan's body camera and service weapon collected now, his statement taken on the record, and every passenger who filmed asked, politely, to preserve their footage. Sergeant Cho is already recording. He can begin. Hale's head turned. So did Brennan's. Across the terminal, Daniel Cho lowered his phone and walked toward them, and the look on his face was not triumph. It was 3 years of held breath finally let go. Commissioner, Cho said, I've been waiting a long time for someone he couldn't silence. What followed did not arrive all at once. It arrived the way these things really arrive, in a cascade, over weeks, each piece landing with its own weight. Kyle Brennan was placed on unpaid administrative leave that night and terminated within the month. The union vice president, suddenly unable to find a single colleague willing to attach their name to his defense. He was charged with assault, unlawful detention, and filing a false report. He took a plea. He served 11 months and is permanently barred from law enforcement in the state. He still owes restitution he will be paying for years. The supervisor who closed all 19 complaints, the union vice president, the man who made him, resigned before the internal review could reach him. But resignation is not escape. Adaora ordered every file he ever touched reopened. The review went federal. His pension is frozen pending the outcome. He cleaned out his office on a Sunday morning. No ceremony, no farewell. Cardboard boxes and silence. Lieutenant Hale kept his job. He had stepped back when it counted, and Adaora was precise about the difference between the men who built the machine and the men who simply got tired inside it. But she put him in front of a room of new recruits, to tell the story himself, what he almost signed his name to, and the 4 seconds in which he chose not to. He does it every Academy cycle now. He does not enjoy it. He does it anyway. The footage reached 2.5 million people in 4 days. Renee's reporter ran it first. The clip of a boarding pass slapped to the floor, and then picked up by the only person on that jet bridge with any dignity left, became the still image on 3 networks. And somewhere in all of it, Adora stood at a podium and said the thing the whole story had been building toward. Not in anger, not in triumph, but in the flat, measured voice of someone making a record. "I want to be clear about why I didn't identify myself on that plane," she said. "I could have. The second his hand touched my arm, I could have ended it with 4 words. I chose not to. Because the next person he stops won't be a commissioner. She'll be a nurse coming off a double, or a college kid flying home, or someone's grandmother. And she won't have my title, my wife, or my files. If I have to announce who I am to be treated like a human being, then the system is already broken, and I was not appointed to protect a broken system. I was appointed to fix it." She let the room sit in it. "My father loaded planes at that airport for 38 years. He taught me to keep my hands where they could be seen before he taught me to ride a bike. No man should have to teach his daughter that. The fact that he did is the reason I took this job." She paused. Authority is not a license. When an officer weaponizes it against the people he swore to protect, the law cannot look away, no matter who signs his checks, and no matter who doesn't. Daniel Cho was promoted to lieutenant, and now runs the complaint intake reform the district had buried for a decade. He keeps the swearing-in photo on his desk, next to a thank you note he won't show anyone. The teenager who filmed himself laughing in seat 3B watched his own video go viral with his own voice on it, narrating a woman's assault for laughs. He posted an apology no one had asked him for. Whether it meant anything, no one can say. But he took the video down, and the next time, maybe, he films without the laugh. Maybe that's where it starts. The man in 1C who nodded his approval was identified in the footage and never said a word publicly. Some silences just get to stay silent. That's its own kind of verdict. The photograph of Adaora's father hangs in the commissioner's office now. Framed at last, an old man in an orange vest squinting into the sun on the tarmac where he gave his back and his hands and most of his years. On the evening it finally went up on the wall, Renee found her wife standing in front of it in the dark office, still in her coat. "He'd have something to say about all this," Renee said. "He'd say I made a scene." Adaora smiled, tired. Then he'd say good. Renee took her hand. They stood there a while, the airport visible through the window across the river, planes lifting off into a violet sky, one after another, the way they had her whole life. "It's better than it was 9 days ago," Renee said quietly. "It's not fixed." "No, until it is," Adaora said, looking at her father in the orange vest. "Someone has to be watching." They turned off the light and went home. If this story made you feel something, anger or recognition, or just the need to sit with it for a minute, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Stories like Adaora's don't travel on their own. We carry them, or no one does. So tell me, wherever you're watching from, have you ever watched someone get treated like they were less than human and felt that pull between speaking up and staying safe? What did you do? There's no wrong answer. There's only the truth. And the next time we get to choose differently. Leave it below. Stay if you believe accountability shouldn't depend on who you happen to be. because the next person they stop won't have the title. And someone has to be watching.